As we begin our services today, I'm going to kindly ask that we turn off or silence all cell phones or electronic devices. Thank you.
Shalom, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Rabbi Gary Gans. I'm saddened but honored to be here today with you as part of your extended family. Before we cut the ribbons of those immediate mourners, there was a real sense of joy in the room, tinged with the sadness of why we're here for Ronald's funeral, but also a sense of all those who he touched, all those he enjoyed connecting with in a life well lived. And the fact that you were joyful to acknowledge his life, acknowledging his family, acknowledging his friends, brings a sense of the wide range of emotions that are expressed here today. We reach out as a community of consolation to Charlotte, married 63 years. Not a number you get to hear about much these days. To their sons, Scott, Stephen, Pete, and Andrew. And we reach out, of course, to his brother, William, who remembers younger, healthier, happier days. And this community of consolation is intact, regardless of our background. The feelings are legitimate and true, and we wish his family strength as they continue to move on despite their loss. We've come together commemorating our sorrow to commemorate Ronald's life. We recall the blessing of his life. We thank God for all that was good and true in his life, and for the precious memories which shall endure. Eternal God, Creator, merciful Father of all, his family and friends bowed in grief seek light to dispel the dark gloom which threatens to overwhelm them. Bless them with your compassion. Ease their burden of sorrow. Send them light and peace, for it is written, "Fear not, as I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I'll sustain you with my power." And let us say, Amen. We also acknowledge the 12 grandchildren, just as are the 12 tribes of the people of Israel. That number 12 becomes strong and symbolic and poignant. I read on his behalf the universal prayer shared among a number of communities, religious understanding. Psalm 23. I'll read a short text from the traditional Hebrew Bible, followed by an English interpretation. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, benodeshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenachaleni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'magle tzedek lema'an shemo. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God has me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters. God guides me on paths of righteousness and revives my soul for the sake of his glory. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set the table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. We're going to be hearing personal anecdotes, stories, familiarity. I am welcoming first to the pulpit his son Stephen to offer words of greetings.
Well, first I want to thank everybody for coming from all over the place and taking time off work. It really means a lot to us for you to be here with us today. As the rabbi said, my name is Steve. I'm one of Ron's sons. So we've prepared a pretty cool, we think, eulogy. We have everybody talking, all the some of the grandchildren, my 4 brothers, and a couple of my dad's colleagues from the hospital. So I hope we're going to focus on different aspects of my dad's life through the years, from the time he was working his way through school, to his family life, and then to his career at Cooper, and many good stories in between. But before we start, I just wanted to specifically thank Dr. Viner, Weinstock, and Wisson. For the last year or so, they've been involved with my dad's care. They were just amazing help and dealt with the 4 brothers and I on a constant basis, and really wanted to thank them personally again. But we would be remiss if we didn't give a shout out for Natalie right here, our dad's health aide. Without Natalie, we can't imagine what the last year would have been like. So I guess our first speaker, I guess, after me is Scott. Scott can come up and talk a little bit about Dad's early years.
Again, I want to reiterate, thank you all for coming. I learned a lot in the procession line just a few moments ago about my father and everybody he's touched. It was quite remarkable. I will talk about his early years. He always wanted to be a physician. From the time he was about 10, he was inspired by the local family doctor. He lived in the northern edge of Philadelphia with his parents and younger brother Bill. Times were not always easy for the family. Both had part-time jobs to help out and worked very hard to fund their educations. My father's desire to become a doctor also inspired his brother to seek a medical education. He worked very hard in school to attain this goal and was accepted to Central High School, a fairly famous academically rigorous school. He enrolled at Temple University and was then accepted to Temple Medical School. He continued to work part-time through all of that period, especially famously as a stevedore on the docks. There are so many memories that I have. Summers in Long Beach Island, boating. We were caught in a blizzard in South Carolina, of all places, and he went out on a tractor to attend to a pregnant female that was about to deliver. I remember working at the old Garden State Hospital where he worked, where he got me a job painting lines in the parking lot and working in maintenance. And how could I forget winding clocks twice a day? Yes. But he was very demanding, though, but extremely caring. He worried about all of us and was very involved in our care and our career plans. He never pressured us to go into any particular field, such as medicine, but expected us to work hard and achieve. He would do anything he could, even with an extremely busy work schedule, to help us and make time for our activities, and was always there as often as he could be. He always said that his main goal was for his children was to help us achieve independence and be successful. He accomplished that goal. I will miss him and love him very much. Again, thank you for coming.
Pete?
Our father was a great teacher, sometimes in the traditional sense, but more often he taught by example. One of my favorite lessons was how to be a great husband. How can we forget his daily routine when he returned home from an arduous day at work? He opened the front door to 4 screaming and fighting boys, followed by an attempted debrief by a mother. What was the lesson? The lesson was, you always need an escape room. Dad would quickly walk upstairs without a word. We would all hear 2 doors close, locks clicking in succession, with a little extra vigilance. Where was he? What was he doing in his safe place to decompress? We all knew his routine. He was sitting in his home office, in his Herman Miller chair, taking his blood pressure, listening to classical music, and sometimes even playing the flute. After a short time, he would return to the family refreshed as his usual pleasant self. Ready also to receive his evening call from Dr. Tama. The first words my dad said on the call were always the same. Hold on, Al, I have to kill one of the kids. My parents met in front of Mitten Hall at Temple University, my mother a freshman, my father a senior, a young man with a very short crew cut and a warm smile. My father was 21 years old, and they spent the rest of their lives together. Even though my parents had their own priorities, interests, and even temperament, they had a lot in common. They enjoyed dining out, watching Philadelphia sports teams in action, antiquing, spending time in their vacation homes in Vermont, LBI, and Naples. They both loved to travel, most of the time without the children, but we took many family trips together. Throughout the years, they traveled around the world, taking in places from Hong Kong to London. They especially loved to travel to Sea Island and take crystal cruises. But we all know my dad was particular about his sleeping arrangements, both home and abroad. Poor air conditioning, the wrong pillow, a lumpy mattress, or even a faint smell would cause an immediate return to the car and off to the next hotel, regardless of the time of night. But the most important commonality is their love of their children and grandchildren. As with his career, when Dad found something he loved for a lifetime. This lifetime, however, doesn't seem like enough, as we're all left wanting more of his love. Wish you were here to come down the steps one more time. Rest in peace, Dad.
And now Stephen returns.
So family life with Dad was very important to him. He always kept his wife, children, and grandchildren close to his heart. My brothers and I always felt his love and his interest in our lives. He was often strict, and sometimes we felt too much. But in his own way, he encouraged us to become successful in our careers, personal lives, and contribute to society in a positive way. Personally, for me, when I was in college and unsure of my career choice, it was my dad who came up with the idea to go to law school. He found Vermont Law School, encouraged me to apply, and aside from choosing Lori as my wife, law school was one of the best decisions we ever made. And Lori, thanks for your strength and support throughout this process. We were fortunate to grow up in a caring family. My 3 brothers and I have always had a close relationship. Through this, I feel we became even closer. I know we always will be available to help each other in the time of need. Although we may have different perspectives on how to deal with things, we did end up at the same spot most of the time. One such spot was when we decided to throw Dad a 60th birthday party. The party was your typical celebration, but for one item, the surprise gift we decided to give Dad. We all chipped in and purchased a jet ski for Dad to use in LBI. Needless to say, he was surprised by the gift, and he really wasn't sure what exactly it was. However, my brothers and I did, and we couldn't wait to go 70 miles an hour all day long in the bay. But it was the perfect self-serving gift that Dad appreciated but never used. For me, Dad really was my best friend. In fact, my brothers sometimes tell me that I morphed into him as an adult. It turned out that I carried on some of the same traditions of him and enjoyed many of the same things as him, like bike riding, Vermont, LBI, and boating, just to name a few. I've also been accused of running a strict household like him. But now, I wouldn't want it any other way, and couldn't be more proud to carry that label with me. And to my brothers, love you all, Scott, Peter, Andrew, and nice work through this terrible, terrible time we've been through. It's also important to note that Lori, Jordan, Dana, and Fern, as well as Nikki, Nicole, and Allison, you guys were such a big part of this whole thing and supporting us through this time, and your love and understanding will not be forgotten. Now, to the grandchildren. Dad, as everybody knows, Dad, as you know, was delighted at the birth of his first grandchild, Alex. Dad was so excited to have grandchildren. And seeing Dad at work managing the birth of Alex was new for me. Because typically I only witnessed Dad working when I would be out all night partying, I guess. And I would come home at 2 or 3 in the morning and I would sit on the sofa and turn on ESPN. And at that point, I would see my dad running out the door, running to the hospital to do another delivery. But that night of my son's delivery was something. He at first was not permitted in the delivery room due to Lori's objections. But after several minutes after Lori started, Dad couldn't take it anymore to be relegated to the grandparents' waiting area. And then he busted in and helped deliver Alex himself. But the special memory I have from that night was when Dad and I were alone walking the halls of Cooper, waiting for Lori to be ready. He told me how much life would change for the better, and being a dad was everything. It was interesting, of course, because my life did change, but so did his. After Alex, he had 11 more grandchildren. Let me see if I can name them all. Ben, Zach, Kyle, Connor, Ryan, Brooke, Danielle, Jake, Sam, Avery, and Caroline, who couldn't be here, Caroline. Dad became a happier and more patient person. He took pride in all of your accomplishments, from dance recitals to sports to your academic successes. And as the grandkids grew older, it became clear that they sought his advice and counsel about every topic. He loved you, and in return, I see how much you loved him the same way. Whew, gosh, I miss him dearly every day since he's been gone. It's unbelievable. He would call me on a daily basis and we would have the same conversation. It went something like this: Steve, what's doing? And then he would ask, how are the kids? And then he would say, where is Pete and Andrew? And in response, I would usually complain about something. And then he would say, been there, done that. And then he would say, that's not my problem. But Dad, you were a legend. Your legacy will live through us, and your grandchildren and kids will understand that, and you will last forever. Thank you.
And now, Andrew.
One of my most impactful memories with my dad occurred while scrunched in the rear bench seat of his favorite two-seat Mercedes SL convertible, circa 1976, no seatbelt. I was around 7 years old and rather inquisitive, and asked the age-old question to my father, the all-knowledgeable man of science: what happens when we die? He said without pause, it's all over, that's it. Shar chimes in immediately in dismay. Ron, why would you say that? And the conversation stops. I took it well, and I appreciated his candor. I could say it led me down a path of pragmatism, discovery, science, biology, and ultimately becoming a doctor. I lived as a rational materialist, learning to appreciate each day for what it was without expectation of something more, an end game. However, in recent years, I came to doubt my certainty. I took up meditation, studied consciousness, quantum physics, and this endeavor, to my surprise, had made me question the nature of reality. As Dad had fallen ill over the last year, I thought it was important to transmit to him my new insights. I think we all had a lot of special time and moments with Dad over the last year, as we all spent as much time as we could, not knowing how much time he had left. So during one of his favorite recent activities, a car ride, I took the opportunity to explain in fairly solid detail the concept of analytic idealism and some cogent arguments for consciousness, not matter, creating reality, much akin to a shared dream. After my long, drawn-out explanation, I thought for sure he tuned it all out, barely keeping his eyes open. He slept in most of these car rides. But to my shock, he responded with a perfectly logical question. If it's all a dream, he asked, what happens when you die? We had truly come full circle, and the moment was not lost on me. I proudly said, no one knows for sure, but if it's a dream, you just wake up and feel rested and content within some prior reality. He took what I said in, and with clarity, he calmly responded, that sounds like a load of crap. He was always direct, and the truth is, no one really knows the answer. But one thing Dad knew was how to live. He, with my mom, traveled the world, loved family vacations, enjoyed cars, the shore, Vermont, food shopping, old clocks. Life was for living and doing, and he got up early, didn't exactly go to bed late, but his days were full. He liked to read mystery novels and play the flute. We all learned from his example, and of course our mother helped too, keeping their social and cultural calendars filled. He loved his career, OBGYN. He never complained about being woken up at 3 a.m. And he loved Cooper, where he was chief for 20 years. It was his second family, and his residents were like his other children. He relished the opportunity to work and teach there. And we know he couldn't have achieved all he did without the help of Eileen, who I know is here with us. I was so excited and proud to have the opportunity to see him at work as a med student on rotation. As a kid, I couldn't really do a take your son to work day with him being a gynecologist. Once I saw what he actually did, I was both amazed, proud, and disturbed. And I knew dermatology was my calling. One memorable story from my time on his rotation stuck out. I was sitting at a table in the maternity ward with 2 other residents writing notes in the days when you wrote notes in a chart. And I was trying to keep a low profile as the son of the chief of the department. A tough-looking nurse walked over with her chart. She said, "I need a seat." She looked at the 3 of us at the table, eyes my short white coat, and says, "Looks like you're low man on the totem pole." Well, one of the humorous residents immediately jumps up, looks at her, and says, "You don't know how wrong you are." "Andrew, please take my seat." But in more recent years, when Dad worked in the clinic, he would sometimes call me with a student if they needed help, diagnosing a dermatology condition with one of the OB patients. They'd text me a picture, and Dad would explain to me the situation, then put the student on the phone for my opinion. I would always say the same thing. "Listen, I know he seems nice and with it, but he's almost 100 years old and senile. Don't listen to anything he says. Just nod your head, turn, and walk away slowly." And Dad loved that one. But Dad was nothing but consistent and honest. He famously told me where I should stick my guitar if seriously considering a music career over medicine. A man of routine, some may now label it severe OCD, but he led by example. He put family first. He was always there for us in times of need. His temper was notoriously bad, but never when something was really serious. I remember he had a strange and unexpected calmness when I broke the news that I totaled my car in college. We know Dad had a full and rewarding life, but none of us were ready to see it end. He was an amazing husband, father, and grandfather, and a great example to all of how to live a purposeful life. My hope after all he's been through this last year is that he can finally wake up to some peace in a new reality. Dad, you will be missed and never forgotten. I love you.
And now Ryan. I'm sorry, Alex. My mistake.
All right. So, as the oldest grandchild, I marked the start of a new phase for my grandfather, grandparenthood. Many people in the audience have already either heard or experienced how it was to work or interact with Grandpop in his medical office, so I'll leave that to them to describe. However, from a grandson's perspective, my grandfather's job as a doctor was a very important part of his life. As a child, I remember sitting in his office, talking with his colleagues, and even going to department social events. Tangentially, I also remember how he would once a week take out $400 cash every time at the ATM on the first floor of 3 Cooper. For what? I don't know. It was weird, but every week, and apparently he did that two weeks ago. So, I don't know, $400. For what? I'm not sure, which gave some insights also as to his idiosyncrasies. Overall, during work hours, Grandpop was charismatic, jovial, and interested in doing his job. Although he certainly enjoyed his job, he liked being home with his family as well. This is where he would have discussions with not only me but his grandchildren. If he had an opinion about something, he would let you know. Whether it was politics, some family dilemma, or thoughts about that year's Phillies color commentator, Grandpa would let you know his thoughts on topics he felt most strongly about. This thought process seemed to become an overall personality trait in that he would always think he was right. Sometimes I agreed with him, and other times I didn't. In this way, I think he taught me to think for myself and be independent. An area in which he was right, however, was his values on work ethics. He believed that having a sound work ethic was needed in order to be successful. This is a message is great and all, and one that I've taken to heart, but this man would let us know again, 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 and again. And it got to the point where at least me, I guess being the oldest grandkid, I've memorized a few because he would just keep telling them. So here are a couple. So one story was about when he was a young teenager. He spent dark, cold mornings delivering baked goods from a local bakery. If you're wondering why he delivered in the early morning, he exclaimed to me that that's what bakers do. That's when they bake. Even though it was a difficult job for a young teenager, Grandpa stuck to the task. In order to pay for medical school, Grandpa would spend his summers working as a longshoreman at a Philadelphia shipyard working with shipments of sugars. Since he was the youngest and smallest of the workers on the docks, he told us they would make him crawl to the deepest part of the rusty and wet holes in order to fetch the sugar that had fallen there. And finally, here's one he talked about a lot. He worked for a catering company. Here, he learned to carve fruit as one of his tasks, and apparently, his specialty was his watermelon boat. This is something so you carved out a watermelon, you took out some fruit, you put some fruit balls in it, and then he would top it off with a cantaloupe flower that, he carved by himself. And apparently, talking to Grandmom and my uncles, this is something he would do after leaving that job, I guess, in his fatherhood. Good for him. What I'll remember most about the person I consider to be a second father is the fact that he was there. If I ever needed some insight as to the next step in my professional career or help with how to handle my father, happened, yep. Grandpa was always there and would understand. I know I'll always love him, and I can say the same for his grandchildren as well.
And now, Ryan.
Thank you. Grandpa Ron was a legend, and he and I had a special connection, primarily through our interests. He loved to travel, a passion he and Grandmom certainly instilled in me. You know, the importance of seeing the world and exploring cultures outside of our own. But our absolute favorite common interest was our shared love of fast cars, a passion he passed down to my father, as some of you may know, and eventually to me. As many of you may know, he always had a Mercedes convertible. The first I remember being an SL from the early 2000s, but over the next 2 decades, I was the person who found him his new model year cars. Grandpop and I would go to dealerships around the country together, whether FC Kerbeck or Naples Motorsports. We spent days together enjoying our favorite pastime. These car-related memories actually remind me of a story that happened very recently. I've been lucky to have spent a lot of time with Grandpa Ron over the last couple months, often coming down with my dad to hang out and we'd take him, Grandmom, and Natalie out for ice cream at Evergreen, a place around the corner from their house. The last of these ice cream adventures occurred just a couple weeks ago. We figured it had been a while since his car had gotten some use, so after our ice cream stop, I decided to take Grandpa for a little joyride on the country roads around Medford. Grandpa Ron always loved driving fast, and it had been a while, so Mom, cover your ears. We decided to do a few 0 to 100 time trials on the back roads, taking hard turns, laughing together, enjoying the thing we both loved so much. I hadn't seen him smile like that in the past year, and it was a heartwarming experience. During the ride, we discussed life, my future, my career and schooling plans, and of course, I would complain to him about my parents giving me a tough time about this or that. He would always respond to my gripes in the same way. Ryan, I'm not worried about you at all. You'll be just fine. You're the man. See, I would laugh whenever he said that too. But I know deep down this short statement, "you're the man," was reflective of a value he instilled in all his children and grandchildren. The idea that we are all capable of achieving great things, and then that capability exists within ourselves, without the need for external motivation or assistance. He made me feel that with hard work and intention, life would point itself in the right direction and success would be inevitable. And for that lesson, I will be forever grateful. So, Grandpop, I know you would always say I'm the man, but the truth is it was always you. You're the man because without you, I can confidently say I wouldn't be who I am today. I look forward to continuing in the legacy you've left, one built through a playful nature, hard work, education, self-belief, and unconditional love. You're the man, and I love you.
And to tie this together, we have two work colleagues. First, Robin Perry, followed by Richard Fisher.
Good morning. We're all here today to celebrate the life of Ronald Jaffe, a man who was important to all of us, a husband and father, a physician, a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. I'm not sure that he would be completely comfortable with me highlighting his professional accomplishments, but I'm going to do it anyway. Dr. Jaffe became professor-in-chief of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Cooper University Hospital in 1988, which is when he and I first met. During his 20-year tenure as chief, he created a diverse and inclusive department, expanding the academic program by recruiting multiple new faculty members, enlarging the residency program, and adding the fellowships in gynecologic oncology and in urogynecology. He also very quickly expanded the clinical services provided in women's health and regionalized Cooper's footprint in the subspecialties of maternal-fetal medicine, urogynecology, and gynecologic oncology. In addition to being a strong departmental leader, he also served on the Cooper Board of Trustees. He was instrumental in the development of the Cooper Physicians Association and was a forceful advocate for physicians having a voice both administratively and in the financial operations of the practice of medicine. He was quite influential in bringing about cultural changes that many of us today take for granted at Cooper University Healthcare, things like physician leadership and physician partnership in business management. Ron accomplished a great deal professionally, and I could go on, but I would be remiss if I did not talk a little bit about what it was like to work with him. He truly loved the clinical practice of medicine. whether it was in the office, in the operating room, or in labor and delivery, and he loved to teach in all those settings. His joy in teaching was readily apparent to all of those who were fortunate enough to learn from him. He brought humor, common sense, and a capacity for storytelling together quite well, very effectively as an educator. He was actually quite popular and quite enjoyable to work with. His personality brought laughter to the workplace. Whether you were working with him clinically or administratively, his self-deprecating sense of humor would often have us all laughing. Ron took his role as mentor very seriously. It seemed to me that he mentored, or perhaps should I say parented, almost everyone around him. He freely provided professional advice, which makes good sense because he was the chief of a department, and that's sort of the role. But he had no problems also offering you financial advice, personal advice, whether you asked for it or not. His interest in and desire to support the people around him was one of his most positive qualities. I am certain that many people in this room received his unconditional support when they were facing a challenging life event. I considered Ron a friend and a mentor. He was always there for me, both personally and professionally, throughout my career, providing support and practical wisdom. I relied on him as a resident. I learned how to lead from him as his vice chief, and continued to benefit from his wisdom in my role as chief and chair. As a result of his unique leadership style, which was rooted in caring and empathy, a rare thing at that time, he did indeed build a vibrant and successful Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology that to this day feels like family, with a culture of mutual support and caring. This is indeed, in part of Ron's legacy. In closing, I want to thank Charlotte, Scott, Stephen, Peter, and Andrew for sharing Ron with us for all those years. His Cooper family is extremely grateful for the time we had together. Thank you.
Hello all, my name is Richard Fisher. I first met Ron Jaffe in 1989 when he recruited me out of fellowship. His recruitment strategy was very simple. He called me incessantly and urging me to come to Cooper. I eventually realized I had only two options. I either needed to sign or get a restraining order. I signed. It's the only job I have ever had. Ron hired me in 1989 to build the Division of Maternal Fetal Medicine, and then he got out of the way and let me do that. And that was always one of his greatest strengths. He found people he trusted, and then he let them do their thing without micromanaging. He believed in building a strong department with strong subspecialties, encouraged growth opportunities whenever they arrived, and if I ever needed to hire additional physicians, he allowed it to happen. We cry at the passage of a family patriarch, a friend, and a mentor, but we must also laugh and celebrate the memory of a life well spent. Ron, as you heard, was a master at poking fun at himself and everyone around him. Too often, we eulogize the deceased and we regret that we didn't tell them those things themselves while they were alive, but not in Ron's case. Between the annual roasts at the resident graduation dinner or his retirement celebrations, he knew the love and affection we had for him and all his idiosyncrasies. So Ron, this is for you, although you've heard it all before. Ron was hopelessly bald. I always believed he had a single strand of hair that was about 5 feet long, which he managed to comb over, wrap around, and fold back. As a younger man with a large afro, I enjoyed teasing him about his baldness, but of course, what goes around comes around. He constantly complained about his health, whether it be his shortness of breath, his knee pain, his chest pain, his dizziness, or his inability to remove his wedding ring after a large Chinese meal. Honestly, I didn't think he would last this long. In fact, I wrote this eulogy 25 years ago. We all accused him of being a hypochondriac, but he loved to say he couldn't wait for the autopsy to show everybody how sick he really was. But despite all his physical complaints, he came to work every single day, except like any good Reformed Jew on the important religious holidays: Christmas, Easter, Good Friday, and Ash Wednesday. He ran the department like an organized crime family. Ron was the Don. He had a mug on his desk that said, "I'm the boss, I can do whatever I want." He had his consiglieres, namely Eileen and Robin, and he had his underbosses, Dawn, Chris, Gail, and Diane. He was not one for long consensus discussions. He would listen to arguments for about 5 minutes, then he would interrupt and say, "Okay, this is what we're going to do." I couldn't say I always agreed with his decision, but I always admired his brevity. And following the advice of Michael Corleone, it was never just business. He took everything personally. He had the cleanest desk I have ever seen. There was never a stray paper or a pile anywhere on his desk. His desk was a reflection of his mind, uncluttered and organized. Ron hated when people cried in his office, and people cried all the time. He even had a plaque on his desk called "No Crying Zone." It didn't work. But as much as he complained about it, it never failed to pull on his heartstrings because everyone knew inside he was a real softie. Ron never met a cesarean section that he didn't like. His most common line was, "I would have sectioned her and been in bed hours ago." He hated that I didn't dress in a white coat and tie. He always criticized me because I didn't dress like a real doctor. He inspired me to perform and publish a randomized clinical trial asking patients' responses to doctors in different attires. And we showed that there was absolutely no difference in their response based on how they were dressed. It was a groundbreaking study. But did Ron concede he was wrong? No. Instead, he always referred to this groundbreaking study as the stupid study. Ron was always accessible day or night. If you called him at home and started to apologizing for disturbing him, he always cut you off and dismissed any apology. He always wanted to know what was going on in his department. You always knew where you stood with Ron. He said what he meant, and he meant what he said. He loved to tell stories, and he loved to laugh. He had the best laugh. And though we might have heard his stories 200 or 300 times before, we still laughed out loud because it felt so good to be part of his world and in his company. As I said, Ron loved to poke fun at people, and he got away with saying the most politically incorrect things that you could ever imagine. He would have been reported to Human Resources instantly. I can't even repeat them for you publicly today. But hardly anyone ever took offense because everyone knew that it came from a warm place in his heart. He was a father figure to many of the residents and faculty, yet he pretended he didn't want the role. I remember years ago at one of our resident graduation dinners, the graduating resident stood up and said that Ron was like a father figure to him. Ron's response, "I already have 4 sons." But he loved to mentor and counsel those who asked and even those who didn't. And finally, his clocks. He loved his clocks, which he had to wind every week, which he dutifully did, even if he had to leave the office to do it. And though Ron's own clock has finally stopped, after a very fulfilling life as a chief, program director, devoted husband, father, grandfather, and brother, his vision and personal impact will remain with all of us whose lives he has touched, forever timeless.
I appreciate hearing all these stories, anecdotes. It was like a paint-by-number picture, and slowly, slowly, it all came together, and you could see the full portraits. So I appreciate and thank you for all the elements that you've offered here today. We turn now to the concluding prayer here in the chapel. It is known as El Malei Rachamim, God the Compassionate One. Even in times of sadness and sorrow, we turn to God for support. During this prayer, I also will be referring in the Hebrew to his Hebrew name, which is Reuven, which incidentally was the name of one of the 12 tribes, so it's, again, symbolic of the 12 grandchildren. I do ask all of you kindly to please stand for this prayer. El malei rachamim, shochein b'ambromim, hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina. B'ma'alot kadoshim u'toharim, כזוהר רקיע מזהירים את נשמת ראובן שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים ושטרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Ron Jaffe, known as Reuven in Hebrew, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is his portion. May he rest in the tranquility of shalom, of peace. And let us all say, Amen. Kindly be seated. If anyone is moved to offer a memorial donation in his honor, the family is asked to be made to the Jaffe Women's Care Center at Cooper University Hospital or the American Heart Association. The interment is going to be at the Locust Wood Cemetery on Route 70. Following that ceremony, the family has asked me to invite you to join with them at lunch at Aldo Lamberti, which is very close to the cemetery. At the beginning, just before we begin those proceedings, I'll be leading a very small and short Shiva service. I welcome you to join us for that inspirational moment as well. Thank you. Adonai niyagur bo'elecha miyishkon bahar kodshecha oler tamim b'choel tzedek l'dover emet lavavo lo ragal al lishono lo asal le'ehu ra'a yechecha